Alright, so I think Shin Megami Tensei V's world feels small when you compare it to previous games in the series. And I'm not talking about the literal surface area of the map. I'm saying that psychologically, SMT5 doesn't feel big, it doesn't feel mysterious, and I don't get a strong sense of adventure compared to what I got in previous Megaten games. One reason why is because of a concept I'm gonna get into called abstraction. And this concept can be explained by comparing SMT5 to a lot of different games in the series, but first I'm gonna focus on SMT5 and Nocturne. Now, in SMT5, you're exploring a giant wasteland called Dot, and it just has a bunch of sand, rubble, and abandoned buildings. It's a wasteland, basically. Now, in Nocturne, you're also exploring a wasteland, but there's a key difference between how Nocturne handled it and how SMT5 handled it. In Shin Megami Tensei V, you're moving your literal character model through an open zone. But in Nocturne, you explore the desert by moving this marker thingy on a world map. So basically, Nocturne uses abstraction to represent the fact that your character is moving through those more desolate, homogeneous parts of the wasteland, instead of literally making you move your character through those parts of the wasteland. I hope that makes sense. So let's tie all this together. Abstraction is basically when you convey something in a theoretical way instead of conveying it in a literal way. In the case of Nocturne, you aren't literally moving your character generally through these parts of the desert like you are in SMT5. And I prefer Nocturne's approach for a lot of reasons. First of all, aesthetically speaking, wastelands don't got a lot of variety. For the most part, it's gonna be sand and rubble. So from a player standpoint, if the environment isn't offering me much visually or interactively, then I'd say it's better to just save time and present it to me in a way that cuts out the fluff, basically. I'd rather move my marker thingy on an abstract version of the map because it takes less time than moving my character through an open zone version of the same aesthetic. And I guess the argument against this would be that it makes the world feel less believable, it makes the world feel less immersive, and my response to that would be believability isn't what makes a world feel more immersive. Keeping the player engaged is what makes a world feel more immersive, in my opinion. So like when a game wants to convey the message that 20 years have passed in a story, they aren't gonna literally make the player wait 20 years in real life just to convey that message. They're either gonna just straight up tell you through flavor text that 20 years have passed, or they're going to imply that 20 years have passed by making characters look older or making the world look different or something like that. Basically, the goal is to keep the player engaged, not necessarily to always give them a one-to-one experience of what the in-game world is experiencing. On that note, turn-based combat is also a form of abstraction. So for example, if your character has a high agility stat, you'll dodge moves more. And in this instance, dodging moves requires no input or no reactions from you as a player. In other words, the game doesn't require you to literally evade a move. The act of dodging is abstracted through your stats and the game just telling you when a move missed. Now, before y'all come at me, I'm not saying that abstraction is necessary for every game, but I think it's just a useful tool for when a game needs to trim the fat and just keep the player engaged with the parts that matter the most. This leads me into the next aspect of SMT5's world design that feels small when I think back and compare it to previous Megaten games, and it's the environmental diversity, or lack thereof. So earlier, I talked about how in Nocturne, they used the marker thing in the desert areas of the map, while SMT5 used the marker thing mainly in the Tokyo areas. These different approaches informed a lot of the environments you end up seeing in these games, with Nocturne's environments being more visually diverse and SMT5's environments having a more homogenized look throughout the game. Granted, in SMT5 Vengeance, the enhanced version, it does seem like they tried to address this issue a little bit and add some new map areas and some new quests and some new things to do in the Tokyo parts of the map. And I want to take this moment to give a shout out to the Turbo Granny side quest, which was this side quest that had you chasing a super fast demon named Turbo Granny on the Tokyo map. Not only was this a cool way to pay homage to an actual Japanese urban myth, but it actually required some reflexes to complete. I had a little hard time, so that was cool. And it's one of the most unique ways actually that I've seen the marker map be used in Shin Megami Tensei actually. So shout out to that. Unfortunately though, even the enhanced Vengeance version of SMT5's world still doesn't feel as vast or mysterious as previous Megaton games. Soul Hackers has you exploring haunted mansions, warehouses, business offices, and Nocturne is even more diverse with the environments. You got underground sewers, nightclubs, shopping malls. Very cool, very diverse. And what makes this interesting is that in terms of literal surface area, none of these games match the size and scope of SMT5. But because of the diversity within the environments, it gives the illusion of a bigger world because my imagination just fills in the blank. On the other hand, walking miles and miles through desert areas with different Instagram filters doesn't do much for making me feel like I'm on an adventure. Basically, I'd rather have a wide variety of different environments that are smaller than have a few big environments with little to no variety. Now, there's one more thing I want to talk about when it comes to how SMT5 kind of falls short of giving me that sense of adventure that I get from a lot of the other Mega 10 games, even some of the ones that aren't visually diverse either, and it's the game's lack of navigational friction. And I know the word friction is a little overused lately, but I think it's useful here. When I say navigational friction, what I mean is that I can't get lost in SMT5's world, really. It's pretty easy to find my way around. The map you spend the most time on is generally a very open space where most of your routing is immediately visible. There are some moments of navigational friction when it comes to some collecting stuff like the Glory and Mimans. And it does turn the game into somewhat of a light platformer sometimes, which is actually interesting, but this game does not constantly hit you with traps, puzzles, confusing paths, or environmental hazards even, like in some other Megaton games. Most exploration that happens is very streamlined in this game, and this isn't a bad or a good thing, but it once again does end up making the game feel smaller. In a game like Strange Journey, for example, the dungeons have very complex routes that have looping paths that can either take you to a dead end or take you in circles. This type of map design ended up making me have to really engage with the world to find my way around. Here in the Delphinus dungeon, there's a section that automatically moves your character in several different directions, like an auto walk escalator basically. You have to figure out where the auto walk section will lead you in order to make it out. Some parts of this section will lead you to trap holes that drop you back to the floor below you, or they just auto walk you all the way back to where you started. Shin Megami Tensei 1 pioneered the maze-like dungeons that you see in a lot of later Megaton games too, and when it comes to navigational friction, not only does it have tricky mazes that can leave you lost and environmental hazards like poison floors that damage your party, but there's even a system called magnetite that's required to even summon demons in your party. The twist here is that you lose magnetite with every step you take, which means you have to be very mindful when navigating the environment, and every choice had to be intentional. So yeah, regardless of the actual scope of older Megaton games, they still ended up feeling bigger generally than what I got from SMT5 because my interaction with these maps were more involved. I had to think about how to get around a trap or try to remember whether I should even turn left or right. And when more of my time is spent actually thinking about how to explore these worlds, then these worlds end up taking more mental space. And when it comes to having a sense of adventure in a video game, to me, that is the most important part, the mental aspect. In other words, games are a virtual space. I'm not there to physically experience the actual literal size of these worlds yet. So what matters is how I mentally experience it, whether it's my imagination filling in the blanks or not. So whether it's visual diversity or abstraction or navigational friction, I feel like Megaton used these things in the past to really give my imagination a sense of adventure that I didn't really get from Shin Megami Tensei V. But what did y'all think though? Did Shin Megami Tensei V's world give you a sense of adventure? Were you satisfied enough with the map and exploring the world of Shin Megami Tensei V? Let me know what y'all think. It's GK. Peace out.